February 24th, 1978, Northern California. A quiet Friday night. The last light fades beyond the orchards. Cold air settles over empty roads as small farming towns prepare for another ordinary evening. For 5 friends, it's just another night together. They spend the evening watching a college basketball game. The final buzzer sounds. Fans stream through the arena exits. Car doors close. Engines start. Headlights disappear into the California night. Among them, 5 friends begin the drive home. Tomorrow is important. A basketball tournament awaits them in the morning. Some are so excited, they remind their families, "Don't let me oversleep." No one realizes those will be some of the last ordinary words they ever speak. As the miles pass, the roads grow darker, the night grows quieter, and somewhere along that drive home, something changes. Then they disappear. No phone call, no request for help, no message, nothing. Morning comes. The basketball tournament begins. The 5 friends never arrive. As the day passes, their families realize something is terribly wrong. Police are notified. The search begins. What appears to be an ordinary missing person case will soon become one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. Somewhere between the final buzzer and sunrise, 5 friends vanished. Nearly 50 years later, no one knows why. Yuba City, Northern California. In 1978, it was the kind of town where familiar faces rarely went unnoticed. If someone missed work, people asked why. If a familiar car wasn't where it usually was, someone noticed. And among those familiar faces, there was one group everyone seemed to recognize. 5 friends. Around town, people simply called them the boys, not because they were children. The youngest was 24. The oldest was 32. It was simply the name that had stayed with them over the years. Rarely did anyone see one without the others. Weekends were simple. Basketball, bowling, driving around town, sharing meals, visiting one another's homes. Nothing extraordinary. Just an ordinary friendship that everyone around them had come to recognize. The one usually behind the wheel was Jack Madruga, 30 years old, quiet, dependable. A former Army truck driver who took enormous pride in his dark green 1969 Mercury Montego. He cared for it meticulously. To Jack, it was more than a car. It was something he had worked hard to own. Bill Sterling was different. 29, outgoing, warm, the kind of person who could start a conversation with almost anyone. He often volunteered at local hospitals, reading from the Bible to patients who simply needed someone beside them. Ted Weiher, the oldest of the group, 32, gentle, soft-spoken. He worked at a local grocery store and was known for his patience and kindness. His closest friend was Jack Hewitt, The youngest of the five, 24 years old, Jack spent his days helping his father on the family farm. When the work was finished, he loved riding motorcycles across the property. Then there was Gary Mathias, 25, the newest member of the group, a former Army veteran, confident, resourceful. Several friends and family members later recalled that the others often looked to Gary when decisions had to be made. Despite their different personalities, they fit together remarkably well. To everyone around them, they weren't five separate people. They were simply the boys. No one who knew them could have imagined that an ordinary Friday night would become the last time all five friends would ever be seen together. All they had planned was a basketball game, a drive home, and another game the following morning. Instead, they unknowingly began the last ordinary journey of their lives. Friday, February 24th, 1978. Earlier that evening, the five friends had driven north to Chico. Their destination, California State University. About 50 miles from home. A college basketball game had brought thousands of fans to the university that night. For the five friends, it was the perfect start to the weekend. Witnesses later remembered nothing unusual. No arguments, no signs of distress, nothing to suggest that this night would be any different from countless others. Inside the arena, the game came and went. The final buzzer sounded. Fans poured through the exits. The bright arena lights gave way to the cold February air. Cars pulled away one after another until only a few remained. Among them, Jack Madruga's dark green Mercury Montego. The five friends climbed inside and started the drive home. Before leaving Chico, they made one final stop. At around 10 p.m., they pulled into Bears Market, a small neighborhood convenience store. They bought chocolate milk, soft drinks, candy bars, snack cakes. Nothing unusual. The cashier later remembered them as cheerful, relaxed, laughing together as they paid for their food. Minutes later, they climbed back into the Montego, pulled onto the highway, and disappeared into the night. No one inside that small market could have known they had just witnessed the last confirmed sighting of all five friends together. The road home should have taken a little over an hour. Instead, it became the beginning of one of America's most enduring unsolved mysteries. By midnight, the five friends should have been home. But midnight passed. Then another hour. House lights slowly went out across Yuba City. Parents assumed they had simply stayed out later than expected. There was no reason to panic. Not yet. Morning arrived. The basketball tournament began. Players took the court. Parents filled the bleachers. But 5 places remained empty. The boys never arrived. That was the moment. Ordinary concern became something else. This wasn't like them. Family members began calling one another. Has Jack come home? What about Bill? Have you seen Ted? Is Gary with you? Every answer was the same. No, no one had seen any of them since the night before. As the morning turned into afternoon, concern became fear. 5 friends had disappeared together, without a phone call, without asking for help, without leaving behind a single explanation. The disappearances were reported to local authorities. At first, investigators believed there had to be a simple answer. Perhaps the car had broken down. Perhaps they had stayed somewhere overnight. Searches began. Roads were checked. Hospitals were contacted. Friends and relatives were questioned. Nothing. There was no sign of the Montego, no sign of the 5 friends. It was as though, after leaving Chico, they had vanished. For 4 days, the investigation went nowhere. Then, everything changed. A single discovery would send investigators far from the road the 5 friends should have taken home. Four days passed. February 28, 1978. No confirmed sightings, no phone calls, no answers. Then, a call reached the Yuba County Sheriff's Office. A forest ranger working in Plumas National Forest had seen the photograph investigators released. He recognized the vehicle immediately. He had already seen it days earlier, parked beside a remote mountain road. At the time, it hadn't seemed unusual. Cars sometimes became stranded in the snow. People occasionally returned for them later. But now, that same car belonged to 5 missing friends. Investigators headed into the mountains. The road climbed through dense pine forest, higher and higher, until snow covered the landscape. Nearly 70 miles from the route the 5 friends should have taken home, they found it. Jack Madruga's dark green 1969 Mercury Montego. The car wasn't wrecked. It wasn't hidden. It simply sat beside Oroville-Quincy Road, as though its occupants had stepped away only moments before. The driver's window was rolled down. The doors were unlocked. Inside, everything remained. Chocolate milk cartons, soft drink bottles, candy wrappers, the basketball program from the game in Chico, with the final score written on the back. Nothing suggested the 5 friends had planned to disappear. Investigators then examined the car more closely. The rear wheels had spun into the snow, but the Montego wasn't hopelessly stuck. Officers later believed it could likely have been pushed free. There was still fuel in the tank. The battery worked. The engine started. Mechanically, the car was capable of leaving. Yet someone had walked away from it, leaving behind their shelter and their best chance of getting home. For the first time, investigators realized this wasn't a routine missing person case. Something had happened on that mountain. They just had no idea what. Finding the Montego answered one question. The five friends had reached Plumas National Forest, but it created a far more troubling one. Why? Somehow, they had traveled nearly 70 miles away from the route they should have taken home. Deep into the Sierra Nevada, up Oroville-Quincy Road, a narrow mountain road surrounded by dense pine forest. By late February, winter had taken complete control of the landscape. Snow covered the ground. The temperature dropped below freezing. Beyond the headlights, there was only darkness. No homes, no businesses, no street lights, only forest, stretching for miles. The Montego had crossed the mountain's permanent snow line, more than 4,400 feet above sea level. This wasn't a place most people would find by accident, especially in the middle of a winter night. Investigators searched the surrounding area, but beyond the car, there was almost nothing. No reliable footprints, no discarded clothing, no clear trail leading away from the road. Then, the mountain erased what little evidence remained. A powerful winter storm swept across the region. Fresh snow buried the landscape. Search teams struggled to move safely through the terrain. Eventually, the search had to be suspended. By the time crews returned, days later, the mountain had changed. Whatever traces the five friends had left behind had disappeared beneath the snow. For the next 4 months, the Sierra Nevada kept its secret. Before the mountain fell silent, investigators received one more lead. His name was Joseph Shans. On the same night the five friends disappeared, Shans had also become stranded on Oroville-Quincy Road after his Volkswagen Beetle became stuck in the snow. Unable to free it, he stayed inside. Later, he told investigators he began suffering severe chest pain. Believing he was having a heart attack, he waited in the darkness. Then, he heard a whistle, short, sharp, somewhere beyond the trees. A few moments later, headlights appeared farther up the road. Another vehicle. Thinking someone had come to help, Shans stepped outside. What he claimed to see would become one of the most debated parts of the entire investigation. He later told investigators there was a dark-colored car, which they believed may have been Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego. Behind it, he said, was an old, rusty, red pickup truck. Several people stood nearby. Shans called out for help. According to his account, the voices stopped. The headlights went out, and the pickup disappeared into the darkness. Later, he claimed he saw flashlight beams moving through the forest. He shouted again. No one answered. The next morning, Shans left his stranded Volkswagen and walked back down the mountain. Only after hearing about the disappearance of the 5 friends did he contact investigators. If his account was accurate, then the 5 friends had not been alone that night. For investigators, it sounded like the first real breakthrough, until they interviewed Joseph Shans again, and his story began to change. At first, Joseph Shans appeared to be the investigation's most important witness. But the more investigators questioned Shans, the more his story changed. His earliest account was simple. He reported seeing another vehicle. Later interviews introduced new details: a rusty red pickup truck, several people standing outside, flashlights moving through the trees, a woman carrying what appeared to be a baby. With each interview, the story grew. Some details even contradicted his earlier statements. The number of people he claimed to have seen changed repeatedly. Eventually, Shans admitted something investigators couldn't ignore. Because he believed he had suffered a heart attack that night, he wasn't certain every memory was accurate. That left investigators with a difficult problem. Joseph Shans had unquestionably been on the mountain, but how much of what he remembered could actually be trusted? There was another inconsistency. When Shans was first helped off the mountain, he reportedly said his Volkswagen had become stuck after another vehicle followed him too closely. He made no mention of a red pickup, no flashlights, no woman carrying a baby. Those details appeared only later. Doctors later confirmed Shans had suffered a heart attack, but they could not determine exactly when it had happened. Whether it affected his memory that night was never established. In the end, investigators reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Joseph Shans was almost certainly a genuine witness, but they could never determine which parts of his story were real and which parts were not. The investigation had gained a witness, but not the answers it desperately needed. The search continued, but the mountain refused to give up its answers. Winter refused to let go. Storm after storm, fresh snow buried the landscape. Weeks passed, then months. The search continued whenever the weather allowed. Deputies, forest rangers, volunteers, family members, they searched roads, forests, ravines, cabins, every place they believed the 5 friends might have gone. They found nothing. No clothing, no reliable footprints, no sign of where the 5 friends had gone after abandoning the Montego. As February became March, and March became April, the investigation slowly lost momentum. New leads became harder to find. Every reported sighting was investigated. None led anywhere. For the families, time changed nothing. Every unexpected phone call still brought hope, Every rumor still deserved to be checked. But one by one, every lead ended the same way. Nothing. Then, nearly 4 months after the disappearance, the mountain began to change. The snow finally started to melt. Roads that had been buried all winter slowly reopened. Forest Service crews returned to inspect seasonal buildings scattered across the mountains. It was routine work, the kind they carried out every spring. No one expected that one of those routine inspections was about to uncover the first real answers and reveal that the mystery was far stranger than anyone had imagined. June 4th, 1978. 101 days had passed since the 5 friends disappeared. Winter had finally begun to loosen its grip on the Sierra Nevada. That morning, employees from the United States Forest Service returned to inspect remote trailers before the summer season. It was routine. The cabins had been locked throughout the winter. No one expected to find anything unusual. One trailer stood alone among the pines, nearly 20 miles from where Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego had been discovered. As an employee approached, he noticed the lock had been forced open. Someone had been inside. He stepped through the doorway. The trailer was cold, silent. Blankets lay scattered across the room. Empty food cans rested on the floor. It looked as though someone had been living there. Then, he looked toward one of the beds. Beneath several carefully wrapped blankets lay a human body. Authorities were called immediately. Hours later, investigators confirmed the body belonged to 32-year-old Ted Weiher. For the first time in more than 3 months, the investigation had found one of the 5 friends. But the trailer raised even more questions. Inside were emergency supplies, food, matches, heavy winter clothing, a propane heating system. Everything needed to survive. Some food had been opened. Most of it had not. The heater had never been used. Nothing suggested the supplies were out of reach. Yet they had been used only sparingly. Then came the medical examiner's conclusion. Ted had not died in February. Based on his condition, he had survived for approximately 8 to 13 weeks after the group disappeared. Someone had cared for him. Someone had brought him food. Someone had wrapped his body in blankets after he died. And then, that person vanished. The mountain had finally given investigators their first answer. One of the 5 friends had survived. But the greatest mystery was only beginning. If Ted Weiher had survived for weeks, one question demanded an answer. How? The medical examiner concluded that Ted had lived for approximately 8 to 13 weeks after the 5 friends disappeared. He hadn't simply wandered into the trailer and died. For weeks, he remained alive. Investigators studied the scene carefully. Ted had been placed in a bed. Several blankets had been wrapped around him. His feet showed severe frostbite. Many of his toes had likely become gangrenous. He had lost nearly half his body weight. His beard and hair had grown significantly. Everything suggested a long struggle to survive. Near the bed, investigators found open food containers from the trailer's emergency supplies. Someone had accessed the food. Ted could not have survived for weeks without it. His personal belongings, his wallet, his watch, and his gold necklace had been placed neatly beside the bed. Nothing about the scene suggested panic. Instead, it appeared that someone had cared enough to make Ted as comfortable as possible. Then investigators noticed another detail. Ted was wearing leather shoes that did not belong to him. They belonged to Gary Mathias. At some point, Gary had given Ted his own shoes. Why? No one knows. But Gary himself was nowhere to be found. His jacket was missing. His backpack was gone. His keys had disappeared. Unlike Ted, Gary had walked away from the trailer. Where he went, what he was searching for, or whether he ever found help, remains unknown. The trailer had revealed one heartbreaking truth. Ted Weiher had not faced the end alone. But it had also created another mystery. Where was Gary Mathias? Investigators hoped the renewed search would lead them to Gary Mathias. Instead, the mountain revealed the others first. Sheriff's deputies, Forest Service personnel, volunteers, and family members returned to the mountain. As the snow slowly melted, more of the wilderness revealed itself. Then, the mountain began giving up its secrets. 2 days after Ted Weiher was found, searchers discovered the remains of Jack Madruga. Inside his pocket, investigators found the keys to his Mercury Montego. After everything that had happened, he had never let them go. A short distance away, they found Bill Sterling. The two friends had died within the same general area. Whether they remained together until the end, no one has ever known. 3 of the 5 friends had now been found: Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling. Only Jack Hewitt and Gary Mathias remained missing. The search continued. Among those climbing the mountain was Jack Hewitt's father. Like every parent there, he refused to stop searching for his son. Then, the mountain answered him. Beneath a manzanita bush, he noticed something that didn't belong. He stepped closer. It wasn't a backpack. It wasn't a jacket. It was part of his son's spinal column. Nearby, searchers found Jack's shoes, his blue jeans, hope ended on that mountainside. The following day, a sheriff's deputy searched the slope below, roughly 300 feet downhill. He discovered Jack Hewitt's skull. Dental records later confirmed his identity. Months of harsh weather and scavenging animals had scattered much of his remains. The medical examiner concluded that exposure to the freezing mountain conditions was the most likely cause of death. One by one, the mountain had returned 4 of the 5 friends: Ted Weiher, Jack Madriga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt. Only Gary Mathias remained. Investigators searched again. Forests, cabins, creek beds, logging roads, steep ravines. Nothing. No clothing, no backpack, no remains. No trace of Gary Mathias was ever found. The search was over, but the investigation was only entering its most difficult chapter, because finding the victims had answered almost nothing. Instead, every discovery created another question. By the summer of 1978, the search was over. 4 of the 5 friends had been found. Gary Mathias was still missing. One by one, investigators laid out every piece of evidence: the Montego, the trailer, the bodies, the photographs, their reports. Instead of revealing the truth, the evidence seemed to contradict itself. The Montego still had fuel. Its battery worked. The engine started. Investigators believed it likely could have been pushed free. Yet the 5 friends abandoned it. Jack Madruga was later found carrying the keys. The driver's window had been left open. The doors were unlocked. Nothing about the scene suggested a normal breakdown. Then there was the trailer. Emergency food remained on the shelves. Heavy winter clothing was available. The propane heater had never been used. Ted Weiher survived for weeks. Yet something had prevented those inside from using everything around them. Then there was Gary Mathias. His shoes had been left behind with Ted, but Gary himself had disappeared. No body, no clothing, no backpack, no trace. Every answer created another question. Every clue pointed in a different direction. The deeper investigators looked, the less the evidence agreed with itself. By the end of 1978, investigators no longer had a missing person case. They had something far more difficult. A mystery where almost every proven fact seemed to contradict another. And before investigators could understand what happened, they first had to answer one more question. Could any of the witnesses actually be trusted? The physical evidence had taken investigators as far as it could. Now, everything depended on the witnesses. Joseph Shawns remained the most important. He had unquestionably been on Orville-Quincy Road the same night the five friends disappeared. But after multiple interviews, investigators could never determine which parts of his account were accurate. His testimony remained both valuable and deeply uncertain. Sean's wasn't the only person to come forward. Another witness, Mr. Redrick, told investigators he believed he had seen Ted Wire sometime after the disappearance. According to his account, Ted was with two unidentified men. They drove away in an old rusty red pickup truck. Investigators followed the lead. Nothing ever confirmed it. Then came another report. Employees at Mary's Country store told investigators that several young men had stopped at the store after the disappearance before leaving in an older red pickup truck. Once again, the report could never be verified. Individually, none of the witness statements proved anything. People misremember events. Rumors spread. False sightings are common in missing person investigations. But one detail continued to surface: the red pickup truck. It appeared in more than one account. Investigators could never connect it to the five friends, but they could never eliminate it either. Whether the truck was an important clue or nothing more than coincidence has never been answered. And with the witnesses exhausted, investigators were left with only one place to look next: the five friends themselves. Because perhaps the answer had never been hidden in the mountains, but in the men who disappeared there. Perhaps the answer really had been with the five friends all along, because there is one part of this story we've intentionally left until now, not because it wasn't important, but because it doesn't explain everything. It only explains some of it. The five friends were all associated with a local organization known as Gateway Projects, a program that helped adults with developmental disabilities build independent lives. They held jobs, earned money, played sports, traveled around town, made their own plans, and spent nearly every weekend together. Around Yuba City, people simply knew them as the boys. They weren't defined by their disabilities. They were known for their friendship. Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Ted Wire, and Jack Hewitt all lived with varying degrees of intellectual disability. Their families described them as kind, gentle, and dependable. They loved routines. They trusted people easily, and they looked forward to simple things, especially basketball. The tournament scheduled for the morning of February 25th wasn't just another game. For them, it was one of the biggest days of the year. Some had already laid out their uniforms before leaving home. Others reminded their families, "Don't let me oversleep." Everything they did that evening suggested one thing: they fully expected to be home before morning. Then there was Gary Mathias. Gary was different. He did not have an intellectual disability. As a teenager, he had served in the United States Army, but after his military service, his life became increasingly difficult. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. There were periods when his illness became severe. He experienced paranoid delusions. He struggled with violent outbursts. He was arrested several times. At one point, his family feared they might lose him completely. Then, something changed. With the right medication, consistent treatment, and the support of gateway projects, Gary rebuilt his life. He found stability. He formed close friendships. He became one of the group's most dependable members. Several friends and family members later recalled that the others often looked to Gary when decisions had to be made. There is one final detail investigators found especially significant. When Gary left home that Friday evening, he left behind every dose of his medication. His prescription remained exactly where his family expected it to be. To investigators, that mattered, because Gary depended on those medications every single day. Leaving them behind strongly suggested he had every intention of returning home the very next morning, not disappearing forever. For some investigators, their medical histories helped explain certain decisions made after abandoning the Montego. Perhaps confusion, fear, or panic influenced what happened on the mountain. Perhaps Gary's mental condition gradually worsened after weeks without medication. Those possibilities cannot be ignored, but they also cannot explain everything. Medical history doesn't explain why they drove 70 miles in the wrong direction. It doesn't explain the abandoned car, the open driver's window, the untouched heating system, or the mysterious reports of a rusty red pickup truck. Their diagnoses provide context, not conclusions. And after everything investigators had uncovered, one question still remained. What really happened on that mountain? For nearly 50 years, people have searched for that answer. None have ever agreed. For nearly 50 years, investigators, journalists, and countless others have tried to answer one question. What happened to the Yuba County Five? There has never been a single explanation, only theories. Some are supported by evidence. Others rely almost entirely on speculation. None have ever explained every piece of the puzzle. The first theory is that the 5 friends simply became lost. At first glance, it seems possible. A wrong turn, a snow-covered road, darkness, panic. Perhaps they kept driving, believing they would eventually find another way home. But that theory quickly runs into problems. The road climbed steadily into the Sierra Nevada. They passed multiple opportunities to turn around. Even after abandoning the instead of returning toward the highway. Then there is Gary Mathias. Some investigators have wondered whether his schizophrenia played a role. Without his medication, his condition may have gradually worsened. If Gary became confused or paranoid, the others may have followed someone they trusted. It is a possibility, but only a possibility. There is no evidence proving that Gary experienced a psychiatric episode that night. And even if he had, it still doesn't explain every decision the group made afterward. Another theory suggests they encountered someone else. Perhaps the mysterious red pickup truck. Perhaps another driver. Perhaps someone they willingly followed. That idea has fueled decades of speculation. But despite years of investigation, no person has ever been conclusively linked to the case. No physical evidence supports foul play. No witness ever identified a suspect. The theory remains exactly that, a theory. Others believe fear itself explains the case. A wrong turn became panic. Panic became poor decisions, and each mistake led to another until there was no way back. It is one of the simplest explanations, yet it still leaves important questions unanswered. Why abandon a working car? Why leave behind a functioning heater? Why was Gary Mathias never found? Every theory solves part of the mystery. None solve all of it. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. Because after decades of investigation, the evidence has never pointed to one answer. Only more questions. Questions that have remained unanswered for nearly half a century. The investigation eventually came to an end. The questions never did. 5 friends left a basketball game. They climbed into a car. They started the drive home. Somewhere between the final buzzer and sunrise, their story changed forever. Investigators found evidence. They found answers, but never enough. Every theory explained part of the mystery. None explained all of it. Perhaps that is why this case still haunts so many people. Because the greatest mystery was never the mountain itself. It was the missing hours. The hours no one witnessed. The hours no evidence ever recorded. Maybe one day, someone will uncover the truth. Or perhaps the Sierra Nevada has already revealed everything it ever will. Until then, the Yuba County Five remain a reminder that sometimes the most haunting mysteries aren't the ones with no evidence. They're the ones where all the evidence exists, and still no one can explain what really happened.